Hi, my name's Ellie. Thanks for joining me today. Have you ever met someone and instantly, the moment you met, you just disliked them straight away? But you couldn't explain why. You just had a sense that there was something about them you didn't like. Maybe they were too loud, too confident, or too familiar in some way. I don't know. And there was something inside them that kind of made you recoil from them as though you couldn't really stand to be in their presence. Well, what if that reaction wasn't actually about them? What if it was your own wounds from the past coming back, like a mirror reflecting back onto you? I remember back in 2016 when I moved back to Australia after living for about a decade and a half in the UK. I had changed a little bit because I'd been overseas for a long time and I probably had picked up a bit of a British accent, which I don't think I've lost completely. At least the Aussies around me tell me that I haven't. And I probably also have a little bit of American because I've spent a lot of time away from home. Anyway, I moved back to Australia and I had just bought my house and I was getting to know my new neighbourhood. And I ended up getting to know a small group of people that went to a local dog park because, of course, I always have a dog. And there was this man there who also had a dog, thankfully, because otherwise it'd be kind of weird if he was hanging around the dog park. I think I'd spoken to this man in my lifetime maybe once. I mean, okay, I'll be generous, maybe twice, but I think it actually was only once. And I'm not sure that I ever really even asked his name or anything. It was just one of those brief things, two people standing around watching their dogs play, that kind of thing. I'm not even sure if I even got to the point where I knew what his dog's name is, and that is saying something. That means I barely spoke to him at all because, dogs are worthwhile getting to know. So if there was a dog in the vicinity who had a name, chances are I would have heard the name and remember it because, I don't know, dogs. About a month or so after we spoke, I bumped into the group in the dog park that he would normally be standing around with talking while the dogs played around them. And one of the people in the group said the weirdest thing. It was actually really memorable. She said that the man really disliked me. He had said something to the group like, "Oh, I can't stand that woman and she's so stuck up." That's what he said, which I guess means that I was aloof or I acted superior or something like that. I was actually really surprised because, and it even took me a few seconds to figure out who the woman was talking about because that's how little I had seen this man around and how little we had chatted, barely any conversation at all. But there was obviously something in me that had triggered a wound in him. And I never got to find out what it was because I never really saw him again. And of course, I wasn't going to go and talk to, make a point if I did see him of running across the field to talk to some guy who can't stand me. So I'm not even sure if I would have been able to recognize him in the street. I never knew what it was, but I figured it was something like a projection. Because what else could it be? He didn't have enough exposure to know anything about me. The fact that my accent may have been slightly foreign, I thought maybe that was it. Because I did live in Britain for a really long time and I had just come back and maybe, the British accent sounded a little bit contrived or something mixed in with the Australian accent that I also have. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was a kind of a projection. And I was trying to find an example for today's show and I decided I was going to land on that one. Because if we did chat at all, I think it was probably just about our dogs, which if it was apart from that, I just can't think of what else it could have been. And that's an example of what I think is a person projecting something that's actually within them onto someone else. And the someone else happened to be me. We all think that we can see other people really clearly, but most of the time when we're looking at them and looking at flaws, we're actually looking through a mirror, not a window. A mirror that reflects our hidden fears, our unmet needs, our buried shame about something to do with us, or the perception of us, hidden, shadow perception. This is projection. It's the mind's way of outsourcing the discomfort that we would ordinarily be feeling about ourselves. We disown the part that belongs to us and then we accuse someone else of carrying that very same aspect in their character or their personality. Examples might be, a confident woman will suddenly be perceived as arrogant, and a quiet man is then called weak, and a free spirit can be considered irresponsible. But it can be even more specific than that. Like the cheating husband, for example, who is always accusing or suspecting his wife of looking at other men in some kind of potentially unfaithful way. Or the dishonest employee who's constantly suspecting other people of lying. Or an insecure friend who accuses everybody else of being fake. Or the controlling parent who fears that their child is manipulative. Or the person who hides their own anger but then calls other people aggressive. But maybe all of these examples are just people who are triggering something in us that we haven't made peace with yet. Every judgment that we cast onto others is kind of like a little breadcrumb sort of clue that trails back to us. It's like a double-sided flashlight that we try and flash over there, but actually it just bounces back onto us. So projection is not just a psychological defense to protect us from perceived harm. It's actually a spiritual detour. Yeah, it is. Because it's a kind of an art form that we can construct within us, and we unconsciously use it to master having to avoid the confrontational aspects of our own depth. It's an art that spans the entire history of humanity, and it appears referenced in many different ancient truths from around the world. So the most obvious place to start is the Bible, of course, and so I found an example in Matthew chapter 7, verse 5. This is where Jesus is giving a sermon from the Mount, and he says, "You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." He wasn't just talking to one person, he was talking to all of us. And then in China, in Taoism, there are similar sayings. For example, here's one. It says, "He who knows others is clever, but he who knows himself is enlightened." And then also in Buddhism, the fault of others are easier to see than our own faults. And then in the Talmudic wisdom, there's another quote, and it goes, "People see the world not as it is, but as they are." That's a very clear message. We look at the world, but all we really see in the world is a mirror of ourselves. These sayings, though, don't get me wrong, they're not condemnations. They're not saying that we're flawed in any way. What they are is they're kind of forms of compassion towards us, because the mirror is not going to lie to us. It's not. What it does is it reflects the truth so that we can see that and look deeper within ourselves. And that's why it's always an enlightened moment when we pause before judging somebody else. It's good to stop and pause. My favorite word is pause and ask ourselves, is this about them really, or is it about me? Because often it's going to be about me. So I mentioned before that projection is like a funny little flashlight, because it is. We always point it outwards thinking that it's going to expose someone else. But instead, every time we do that, it ends up shining light onto us. And that's the job that it's designed to do. By understanding this, we can find reflection in our reactions. We can find truth inside the things that trigger us. And we can develop grace in moments that would ordinarily be that of judgment. If you want to know more, you can always check out my video on how to respond to emotional triggers. I'll link it in the description below. Remember, every person you meet is a mirror. Some reflect your light and some reflect your shadow, but all of them help to see yourself more clearly. Welcome to the new world. This is Ellie Dreams Down Under. I love knowing you're here, and I'll see you in my dreams. Bye.